Hey, what's going on, you guys? Bring your friends here. I'm making this video almost a week late, talking about the balance changes that came out on the 23rd of April of 2019. It's now the 29th. This weekend's been pretty busy for me, so I've pretty much held off, as long as I wanted to make this video. But yeah, I'm just going to talk about the Mesmer changes and give my thoughts and opinions on it. Some of the changes were good, some are very bad, and I'm just going to go over it. I got a little list here. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And we're just going to start from the top and then work our way down. So, Magic Bullet. Stun duration for the skill has been increased from 2 seconds to 2.5. I don't really see that it was a needed change, to be quite honest, but I guess whatever. 2.5 second stun, great. Didn't really ask for it though. Not sure if it's still needed, as I said. Just moving down. Counterblade, days duration for this ability has been increased from 1 to 2 seconds. This is actually a pretty decent change for Sword. I'm not sure if that many people are actually still going to use Offhand Sword after this, even though it's still a pretty decent days, to be quite honest. So kind of a, respectable change to Offhand Sword. Illusionary Counter. This is a Scepter 2. This skill now uses an 8-second cooldown in all game modes. This, I actually enjoy the change on Illusionary Counter, because before it was like little over a 4-second cooldown, I believe, and now it's 8. So the reason why I think it's good, because you can still go into illusions and spec into malicious sorcery, and that'll bring it down to a 6.5-second cooldown, which still ain't bad. It's like on the borderline of, would you want to wait that long after using malicious or illusionary counter before using it again? Because that was the reason why I was kind of making it pretty broken, because it was on such a short cooldown. It was like one of the first things you would essentially swap to after swapping to Scepter, using the cooldown, waiting 4 seconds, because by the time you're done with the rest of your skills, you can just go straight back in for a second block and then swap right back into one of your weapon sets. So I think it's still decent with malicious sorcery. We're just gonna have to wait and see if people actually think it's worth investing into illusions to kind of get it back to its former glory without it. Uh, Confusing images. Physical damage to the skill has been split and reduced by 50% in 50 PvP and World v. World. I'm kind of torn on this just because it's a huge damage nerf to Scepter. So the only way I can justify using Scepter now is by leaning more towards condition damage than with power and precision, which I did before, but that's for another time in another video. So is Scepter worth using? In my opinion, still yes. Is it worth using for power? Probably not. I mean, you could get away with it maybe if you were extremely glass, but then obviously that would just raise another question of, if you're not alive, you're not doing damage, and if you're doing it all, just throwing all your chips in on confusing images, I'm not sure how well it's going to work out for you. Moving on to Signet of Illusions. This skill recharge now begins at the same time Shatter skills are recharged. This is a slight nerf to Signet of Illusions, but not enough for even anybody that's not a Mesmer main to notice. So basically what that means now is that its cooldown has been increased by a few seconds after the skill has been used, not at the beginning of the channel. Let's see. Mantra Distraction. Days time for the skill has been increased from 1 to 1.5 seconds. So these are two things that are kind of hand in hand, right? So Mantra Distraction and Confounding Suggestions. Confounding Suggestions is this trait no longer increases days and stun durations. Instead, Diversion stuns foes up for 1.5 seconds and no longer dazes foes. So back before, Confounding Suggestions was a 15-second cooldown, and it would, here, let me take this off really quick, and then go to Dom. Fuck, there we go. So the previous Confounding Suggestions was basically that any daze was turned into a stun for 1.5 seconds on a 15-second cooldown. And after it was nerfed, and basically the one before this current version was, they just decided to extend the duration of dazes and stuns separately within Confounding Suggestions. And basically I made a guess that Mantra of Distraction was to blame for this, and By them putting in Mantra Distraction, like buffing it from 1 second to 1.5 is pretty much telltale proof, at least in my opinion, that that was the reason why they nerfed Confounding Suggestions. And, I talk about this to Zeromus all the time. It's like nerf the bullets, not the gun, and they completely nerfed the bullets and not the gun. Instead of going after the core issue, which was Confounding Suggestions, they instead, or actually the opposite way around. So instead of actually going after the source of the problem, which was Mantra Distraction, they instead nerfed Confounding Suggestions as a result. And with this patch, they're essentially kind of backtracking on their words, trying to make amends for their shitty bounce decisions, in my opinion. And then now it's only with Diversion stuns foes instead of dazing them. But this is very strong. Like, you probably won't see how strong Confounding Suggestions is unless it's like a top tier Mesmer like Zeromus, Reckless, myself, Steel, a few others or whatever. And it's basically meaning that you have to position your illusions almost perfectly, but in doing so, Confounding Suggestions just becomes god tier because it's a 1.5 second stun for yourself and 3 illusions. So if you align it up perfectly, which is very hard to do, that's consecutive 1.5 second stuns, which equals up to 6 seconds of stuns, or 1.5 second stun times 4 back to back, which equals up to a total of 6 second stun consecutively if you have all the pieces in place. So even though the skill is strong, it will take a very good player to actually get the full potential out of Confounding Suggestions. So it's basically a double-edged sword of being very strong, but the skill cap being extremely high in order for you to use it. So it's only a matter of time before we're going to see if Confounding Suggestions does get nerfed or not, or if they're actually going to just look at power in general, just because right now power Mesmer is very strong. Blinding Dissipation. This trait no longer blinds foes in activation with each Shatter skill. It will now cause Cry Frustration to blind every target it strikes. Blinding's duration is split between game modes, lasting 1.5 seconds in World v World and PvP, and 3 seconds in PvE. This is one trait I very much disagree with, and I'll tell you why. Basically and I feel this way about any trait, it should be good by itself. It should not be mandatory for you to pick a different trait in order for the trait to be good. And what I mean by that is Blinding Dissipation by itself is absolute garbage. And the reason why is because you went from 1 blind every shatter, like 1 blind every 12, 1 every 25, every 38, every 50. In my opinion, that wasn't an excess amount of blind on Mesmer. But now you only have one blind, only 25 seconds, and the only reason you would take it at this point would be because of ineptitude, which is the reason why is because you can get a lot of burst confusion now on Cry Frustration, but that's it. The blind is almost kind of like a means to an end. Like, you're not thinking about blinding somebody defensively anymore. Like, that's out the window. And that's essentially like the whole point of blind, is to use defensively. But the way they're incorporating this is they want you to use blind offensively, which really doesn't make much sense, because if you want to get the max amount of impact on Blinding Dissipation, you have to use it offensively. There's literally no other choice. Before there was choice, like you could use Blinding Dissipation in so many ways, right? You can use it, like, say, if you're rezzing somebody and you actually had a few shatters available, you can res somebody, shatter, shatter, blind, blind, to try and, get rid of that cleave that would more than likely kill you. But you can't even do that anymore. Like, if you're using Cry Frustration in a defensive situation, in my humble opinion, you're using it wrong. You're just completely wasting it now. So I won't argue the fact that Blinding Dissipation is strong, and you could arguably don't have to even go into illusions anymore to get a high stack of confusion, but at what cost, right? I mean, it's just like you're getting rid of every defensive layer that Blinding Dissipation used to have for a brief moment of damage with ineptitude as a mandatory trait with it. So I don't know, it just it's like a huge nerf with a semi buff, like, because you have to spec into 2 traits in order for Blinding Dissipation to actually do its job, which I think is completely stupid. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. It's just I don't think they were thinking it through. I mean, I get the intent, but the execution just really wasn't there for me. Moving along, Dazzling. This trait now applies vulnerability when stunning a foe. In addition to dazing them, I believe that's a Dom passive minor. If it'll load. Yep. Dazing or stunning a foe now applies vulnerability. So that is essentially just compounding with confounding images to just give more vulnerability, which, sure, I mean, I don't really know why they included this. You know, whatever. Flow of time. This trait now grants full alacrity amount as soon as it is activated instead of waiting for illusions to shatter. I think that's fine. Seize the moment. This trait now grants full quickness amount as soon as it is activated instead of same thing as flow of time. Pretty much this just needed to happen anyways, just almost like quality of life change. Master of Manipulation. Instead of granting the mirror effect, this trait now grants 3 seconds of super speed. This super speed is applied to allies affected by your manipulation skills. This is a chaos trait, I believe chaos in the first tree. Where's it at? There it is. Manipulations gain recharge, reduction, and grant super speed to yourself, to allies affected by them. Personally, I was never really a fan of mirror in any way, shape, or form, so any change to Master of Manipulation is fine by me, especially when it is void of mirror. Mass Invisibility. Reduce the casting time to land of the land version of the skill to match the underwater version. Increase the base stealth duration from 5 to 6 seconds. Reduce the recharge from 90 to 60. So the cooldown is more important, I think, than 1 second of additional stealth. I think the reason why they did this was because of so many people bitching and moaning about the stealth gyro on Scrapper just being completely out of tune. And don't get me wrong, Mass Invisibility needed some love for some time. I just think it's kind of ironic that they're finally showing this, or, you know, even looking at Mass Invisibility until, you know, people were just complaining on the forums about the stealth gyro just being completely out of hand. And last but certainly not least, Evasive Mirror. Increase the trait's cooldown from 1.5 seconds to 10 seconds in PvP in World v World. Now, don't get me wrong. I hate Mirror. Like, I completely hate it. Personally, I want it gone, like deleted from the game. But at the same time, playing Devil's Advocate, I'm not sure if that would even be worth it anymore. Like, just looking at any of these skills now in the dueling line, like Blind Dissipation, Evasive Mirror, Fencer's Finesse, personally, I think they're all like just standalone skills without anything else. I think all of them are complete dog shit. Like, I would almost argue that as a standalone skill, Fencer's Finesse would probably be better out of all 3 of them. With other traits involved, I think Blind Dissipation would be better out of all 3 of them. But yeah, that's just me. As I said, I don't know if anybody's going to take this skill anymore. And that's what I hate about shit like this, because when people go to balance anything, I don't want something to be nerfed so hard that basically nerfed it to the point of irrelevancy. And that's what I think Evasive Mirror has become. Maybe, I mean, 2 seconds of stealth or of mirror every evade. It's not that bad, but it's not enough to be noticeable. Like, if I were to change this, it would be like 2 to 3 seconds of mirror, like on a successful heal or something like that. Something that the player can at least activate on their own instead of, because Evasive Mirror still feels completely passive, because you're going to get it regardless just by playing the game. At least give the player the choice of when they would like to use the mirror instead of just, oh, you know, I'm simply fighting somebody, because no one's going to be like, oh, fucking 10 seconds are up. Let's time my evade of this attack so I can take advantage of evasive mirror. No, that's just fucking stupid. So, yeah, I mean, my only gripe with that would be give the player more control on when they choose to have evasive mirror, and it might be a little bit better, as I said, like on a successful heal of like, 15-second or more. So basically, you can't use it with like Mantra of Recovery, but you can use it with everything else: False Oasis, Ether Feast, Mirror, and Signet of Ether. But yeah, I don't think there's really anything else to cover. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I'm Let's Bring Your Friends, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.